Welcome back to Atma Occult,
where we compile useful information from classical occult traditions to help you get more out of life.
Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Today we're going to talk about Pisces, the other sign ruled by the planet Jupiter. We have a video on Sagittarius as well, so if you haven't checked that video out, definitely do, because it's really fascinating how different these two signs are, even though they're ruled by the same planet. Pisces is a water sign. Remember, Sagittarius is a fire sign, so that right there tells you how different they are, fire versus water.
Yep.
It's a dual sign, a feminine sign, and it's the original 12th house of the primordial zodiac sign. So that's going to mean no matter where Pisces is in your chart, it is going to have some significations of the 12th house.
Yes, and also the 12th house in that original Kalapurush Kundali is considered a moksha house. So moksha being everything related to letting go of the material world, letting go of attachments. And it is ruled by the planet Jupiter, which is known in Sanskrit by the word guru. And the symbol of Pisces is two fish swimming in opposite directions.
Yeah.
And the Sanskrit word actually for the sign of Pisces is Meena, which means fish.
So we have two fish swimming in an opposite direction. That represents the duality of life. So, and what part of life? Well, one is the material world, so that's the world that we live on here on Earth. And then the spiritual realm, okay? So one fish is swimming towards the higher spiritual plane.
Towards moksha.
Towards moksha. And that's symbolizing your soul's journey towards moksha or liberation.
Mm-hmm.
The other fish is oriented and swimming towards the material world here. So those are opposites, and they kind of represent this little bit of give and take.
An inner conflict, maybe, because this sign is a dual sign.
Dual, yeah.
And so those two different directions, it can be like sometimes you're going towards the material, and sometimes you're following that natural impulse towards moksha that the sign is going to give you.
Fish, of course, are creatures of water. The water element represents emotions, intuition, and the subconscious mind. And Pisces symbol, again, is kind of reflecting this deep emotional sensitivity, intuitive wisdom, and the ability to navigate both the seen and unseen realms. So that fish symbol, I just, to me, is the most striking in the Pisces sign.
Yeah, and that also connects back to the original 12th house being the house of the unconscious mind, of dreams, of connecting to kind of another world.
In the very deep unknown.
Pisces being ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter in ancient texts is described as a Shubha Graha. Graha is the word for planets in Sanskrit, which means something which kind of grasps or takes control of your consciousness. And so that's, on a deeper level, that's what we're describing when we're describing astrology. We're describing the way that planets kind of take hold of people's consciousness in different ways. And Shubha means auspicious or good or benevolent. So as a Shubha Graha, the Lord of Pisces, Jupiter, represents benevolence.
Yes, and so because of this benevolence that Jupiter represents, there's going to be a lot of great qualities that a Pisces individual entails. One being that they're extremely compassionate and empathetic. They have a deep sensitivity to other people's emotions and that natural inclination to help, heal, uplift. They're very selfless, and they often put the needs of others before their own. And they have just a universal love.
One of the reasons for that can be, if you look at the entire zodiac as like, if Aries is the youngest or the most underdeveloped sign, and that's no insult to Aries, but a lot of their qualities can be kind of almost like a baby, kind of like very selfish and only thinking about like well, I need this. I
Me,
want
me,
this.
me,
Me. That can be Aries.
Which is the first sign.
Which is the first sign of the original zodiac. If you go through all of the other signs and eventually get to Pisces, it's like Pisces is the most developed, the most wise, and that can make them that kind of benevolent, helpful. Because when people realize,
that's a good way of looking at
the
it.
meaning of life, when you often see,
Yeah.
or just think about the sort of stereotypical idea of someone coming to a realization of the meaning of life, it always involves, oh, I should help other people. I should be like benevolent and helpful to humanity as a whole.
Yeah.
So
and that's,
they naturally are like that.
And that's something that I think people tend to understand with maturity.
Yeah.
So if you think of Pisces maybe being like the 12th house, it's kind of gone through the whole zodiac. Yeah,
it's the most mature.
Yeah,
Most
it's
mature.
the last sign of the zodiac. So it's maybe like where you would think of someone who's really, really old, has lived their whole life. They can reflect back and they can see their whole life and where they made mistakes and where
Pisces can be an old soul.
Yeah, an old soul.
Even if they're young, still.
Yeah. So they often like to engage with humanitarian work, charitable work, and of course this aligns with Jupiter's very expansive and benevolent nature.
One thing to be conscious of is that with all of this benevolence, and also with the sort of loftiness of Pisces, more aggressive, selfish people can kind of take advantage of the benevolence of a Pisces individual. Because of that compassionate, all-loving spirit, someone else can see that and say, well, I want to take advantage of your generosity. But one of the things that Paladipika, a classical text on Vedic astrology, states about the Pisces individuals is that they can overcome their enemies as well without having to put out a lot of effort, because Pisces is a feminine sign, whereas Sagittarius does overcome their enemies as well, which is kind of a general signification of Jupiter. They do it through their actions. Pisces, they will naturally just overcome their enemies.
Yeah, and they're so benevolent, and they don't typically make. I mean, they're all about humanitarian and charity and love and all that. So anyone could, of course, not appreciate that, but typically that's not a person that gets many enemies in life.
Yeah, an enemy for a Pisces would probably more be just someone who's kind of selfish, who wants to take advantage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And that's something that a Pisces individual is probably more susceptible than a Sagittarius person, because they're not really aware of I think other people's malintentions as much, and they don't.
The Sagittarius as a general and a strategist is more kind of with his feet on the ground, always strategizing, always seeing the good and bad in the world. The Pisces, being so spiritual and lofty, is almost like always connecting to another dimension, and in the meantime something nefarious could be going on down here.
Yeah, they could also be kind of airheady, but not necessarily meaning unintelligent, but head in the clouds, dreamy, things like that, and
connecting to another dimension.
So they're very spiritual and they're very intuitive.
Yes.
So they're kind of always tapping into that. They have a connection to the higher realms and that wisdom that is just like the intuition based. The ancient texts would describe Pisces people as having very devoted hearts. They're seekers of truth. They can excel in any sort of spiritual or mystical pursuit.
And archetypally for a Pisces, the path of bhakti yoga is going to be the most natural path for them, because the 12th house kind of signifies the feeling that can come up in an individual, whether they describe it this way or not, of kind of loving God. And as Lindsay said before, it's kind of like they can be very humanitarian, they can be very loving of all humanity. And that's one way that it can show itself, like they're kind of like loving God or the universe in the heart of every living being. And so the word bhakti in Sanskrit means loving devotion. And so the path of Bhakti Yoga is kind of the path of achieving union with that ultimate source, which is going to be natural for Pisces, being connected to all those 12th house significations, going into another dimension or the highest dimension and achieving liberation. So connecting and having union with that ultimate source of existence through love, by loving that source of existence.
These people are very imaginative and creative. They're highly artistic, which is inspired by their very vivid imagination. They excel in poetry, music, fine arts, which is often mentioned in another text.
Jataka Parijata.
I needed him to help me with I'm not so good at the Sanskrit.
And because the Lagna Lord is Jupiter being exalted in the 5th house, which is going to be Cancer for Pisces, the Pisces individual, this is one of the reasons why it was said that they have like a very devoted heart, because the 5th house represents the heart of an individual.
The physical heart?
The physical heart, or the physical heart, but also the emotional heart. Like if you...
The passion.
The passion.
La pasión.
Or if you say someone's like big-hearted or cold-hearted, a lot of that can be seen naturally from the condition of the 5th house, from whatever sign. So from Pisces, the 5th house being Cancer, with the Lagna Lord getting naturally exalted in the sign of Cancer, that means that they can both have a very devoted heart, but they can also be very good with all of the other significations of the 5th house, such as teaching, arts, creativity, giving advice. They can be very good at advising. This is another signification of Jupiter, being a minister or advisor. And it's also very good for children. Having children, having good quality children, having a good relationship with children, because that might not be something that everyone has. So.
And then just to tie it even more, Jupiter is actually the significator of children.
Yes, the natural karaka.
Exactly. So this is where Jupiter is very heavily influencing, of course, its own sign of Pisces. So with Pisces being a very emotional and sensitive sign,
being a water sign, deeply emotional and connected to that, and also the needs and emotions of others, they're deeply affected by their own surroundings and other people's emotions. Oftentimes they can actually absorb the emotions of others, and that's because they are so empathetic, and they're so caring and benevolent. So if someone near them is really, really sad, not only it's not just I feel bad for that person, let me help them, oh that's sad. No, it's they actually might take on that sadness on themselves. They could absorb it, and then now it's inside you.
Yeah. So then now it's affecting you when you weren't sad, but now you're very sad because you just are so empathetic and you absorb that into yourself. But this can make you kind of overwhelmed and emotionally drained.
And one thing that can also be helpful is cultivating detachment, or what's referred to in Sanskrit as vairagya. And so, because when you're going through the world being very empathic, which can be a very positive quality and very helpful to everyone around you, it can be a little bit draining, and it can also lead to being kind of disappointed by other people's inability to reciprocate. Because remember, Pisces is the most mature sign. So it's very wise and very, very benevolent and helpful. And so you can help others and kind of empathically take their pain away and heal them, but then you can be left, they don't have that ability. They can't, even if they knew that they should reciprocate, they might not know how to do that for you. So you have to be able to have a way to feel a little bit more detached from whether or not they are able to live up to your expectations. So one of the things that can really help kind of avoid this potential negative effect of having other people not being able to reciprocate with you, and that being a little bit disappointing, is if you consciously try to associate with other individuals that are kind of more spiritually oriented or truthful or benevolent. And this can be something that is hard to see, especially early on in life, because people can pretend to be all kinds of things. But if you try, and your intuition can definitely help you as a Pisces, try to associate with people that are a little bit more elevated and a little bit more on your level of benevolence, then you can avoid kind of getting drained by selfish people.
A lot of the ancient texts suggest something called mantra sadhana and bhakti yoga as a way to help stabilize your emotions.
And we mentioned bhakti yoga earlier as that path of uniting with your original source or a deity of some kind through loving devotion or through loving humanity as a whole. What mantra sadhana is, sadhana just means practice in Sanskrit, and mantras are sacred syllables or phrases that would be repeated over and over again. We have a lot of mantras on our channel.
Yeah.
So you could pick pretty much any one that you were interested in.
But Jupiter, of course.
Jupiter mantra, of course, as your Lagna Lord will
always be beneficial.
Will resonate with you a lot.
Yeah.
But doing any kind of mantra sadhana can help you balance your energies, and also because you have that natural inclination to kind of go to another dimension, mantra sadhana is definitely a form of meditation that can be very powerful and can help you kind of escape and get that 12th house energy and that moksha feeling of connecting with another realm.
So because of the 12th sign of the zodiac, which is Pisces, we talked about Pisces people tend to be, they're so connected to that spiritual or that like unseen kind of realm. There could be a lot of escapism and avoidance in this. So while their minds might not be kind of connected to the material world, their bodies are, and there's a lot of material world things that you're going to have to deal with. However, a Pisces person much rather prefer to keep their head in the clouds, maybe in dreamland, and that could come off as avoiding maybe the necessary kind of obligations you have to do in this life. Yeah, maybe you have a job, but like that's not really what's motivating.
Yeah.
That's not really
like for a Capricorn
motivating
for
you.
a Capricorn, because Capricorn is the natural 10th house of the original zodiac. The Capricorn lives for the job or the work.
Loves
Pisces really not as much. It's more about going to another dimension.
Yeah.
Or going toward things that naturally are signified by the 12th house. And so some of those other things that are signified by the 12th house include hospitals, asylums, monasteries, because those are places where people can find isolation. And those are places where people also go to kind of achieve moksha or liberation. Like, it may be intentional or unintentional, but someone might go to a hospital and they die in the hospital and go to the next dimension.
Yeah. Also prisons, right?
Prisons as well.
And then there's a lot of stories.
Which one person I knew a person once who referred to to prisons as America's ashrams.
Yeah.
Because we don't really have ashrams here. It's not like part of our modern Western civilization to have places where people go for spiritual isolation. But a lot of people find spirituality in jail or prison because they're in kind of an ashram.
Yeah, and they're alone, typically secluded. And a lot of them, the whole purpose of prison is to rehabilitate. So a lot of people that leave prison, they come out changed and a lot of times more spiritual, actually.
Yeah. Of course, not always, but it can happen that people become very spiritual, especially if they're put into solitary confinement, which would be the most 12th house version of jail that they could experience. And also, some of the negative significations of the 12th house that can show up are finding escapism
Yeah.
by any means necessary, which usually will involve some kind of addiction. That could be an addiction to drugs or to something like pornography or sex addiction, where it's like, as long as you're doing this thing, as long as you're high or as long as you're engaging in this particular behavior, that feels like you're escaping from whatever it is that you from this regular material reality, which is really mundane. And ultimately the highest manifestation of that is spirituality. Spirituality does the same exact thing that drugs do, it's just without all the negative side effects. So this doesn't mean that every Pisces is going to be at all inclined to do drugs. You would have to see other things
in the chart that are really, really negative afflictions
really negative
on
positions
Pisces
in the chart.
But it just can't.
But it's almost a positive aspiration to get out of this consciousness. It's like the person may be recognizing that this regular mundane material consciousness is kind of like unpleasant.
Yeah. Being tied to money, just work, a job, making money.
And
like,
so the
there's
12th
more.
house Pisces significations, it represents that impulse of getting away from that mundane consciousness. You just want to make sure that that's not through artificial substances or activities, and spirituality can be a genuine way that can give you that without any negative side effects.
Ancient texts mention you may retreat into solitude. So that might be that you just cut people out altogether, and you don't let your friends or your family kind of in at all. And that could be kind of damaging to you, especially if you're in need of actual support. You might be more inclined to be alone, and that's fine. It's fine. Some people need to be more alone than others, but don't withdraw so much that you sabotage your relationships.
This is kind of similar to the video that we made about the Lagna Lord being in the 12th house.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of like, because Pisces
is the 12th house.
Is the 12th house. It's like there can be a need or an inclination towards privacy at times, and so it's just finding a way to balance that where your material necessities don't get neglected.
Another thing, Pisces can tend to be slightly over idealistic. They may place people or situations on a pedestal. Remember, they typically aren't expecting any malice towards them. They don't feel malice, so that could lead to some sort of disappointment or delusion when the reality doesn't really turn out to meet their expectations. So
also the astrological reason for this feeling that can sometimes take place of being disappointed, especially by friends, is that Jupiter, as the Lagna Lord, gets debilitated in the 11th house from the sign of Pisces. So the 11th house from the sign of Pisces is Capricorn, which is the debilitation sign of Jupiter. And so it can mean that friends or your immediate older sibling, like an older sister or brother, your relationship with them can be kind of a little bit disappointing. And so that ties back in with that feeling of other people not being able to meet your expectations.
And it's kind of highlighting a lack of practicality that might exist in the minds of Pisces individuals. They often avoid logical reasoning or practical concerns, but those things have to also, that's where you need to be grounded. You need to find balance with these things. Otherwise, it can just cause a lot of issues in your life.
And the reason astrologically for this is that Mercury, which is the planet of details, of education, of
analytics,
intellect, of analyzing things, of data, it gets debilitated in the sign of Pisces. And so what that means is it's kind of like you don't really want to deal with details. And that makes sense because Pisces is kind of going to another dimension, escaping and being imaginative. And so all the little mundane, like this little detail, that little detail, this little bill, this little responsibility, this little piece of information, it's kind of like not something that you want to deal with. So,
yeah. And that can lead to a lot of indecisiveness in a Pisces life, and it's hard for them to make firm decisions. They don't care.
Again, a dual sign.
Yeah, dual, and they don't care about the details. So they are presented with a choice or decision. They're like, I don't know. But it's important to try to find some sort of balance and grounding. Pisces tend to focus a lot on ideals rather than the practical matters. This also kind of ties into a flowing in many directions. So you want to try to practice some sort of stability exercises in your life. If this is you, or you struggle with some of these things, or you know someone who does, adopting some sort of daily practice. And you can start small, pick one thing, like maybe every day I am going to wake up early, or
and make my bed.
Or every day I'm going to run a mile. Just any sort of...
and both of those things are related to the sign of Pisces, by the way.
Oh, yes!
This is just something... That's really
and I didn't do that on purpose. I just made this up.
I think this happens like accidentally when we're talking about the sign, and you'll notice this when you study astrology. It starts to reveal itself to you without you even doing that intentionally, because the sign of Pisces both represents being in the bed. It represents beds. So making your bed, paying attention to your bed, anything related to the bed is represented by Pisces. And also, she said running. All running, especially if a person is like even addicted to running, or gets that runner's high, or loves running, or long distance running in any way. Pisces represents the feet, so running and running as an exercise or something that a person does every day is going to be always connected to the sign of Pisces in some way. So.
Yeah, and I swear I totally said those at random.
Yeah.
But this is just how real astrology is. We're talking about Pisces, and I just happen to name examples that have to do
with Pisces,
with the sign of Pisces. So, those would be great ones for you to incorporate as a discipline or a routine, something with that has to do with Pisces already. Why not?
Yeah.
And of course, meditation is always a great thing, but that will actually help with your connection to being the spiritual and help you actually escape. Because if you can master meditation, you're already kind of being very... you're increasing your intuition, you're being very introspective, you're connecting with a higher kind of power.
Yeah.
So we have tons of options for
different mantras
that you can meditate with on our YouTube channel. So check those out as well.
Whichever one you resonate with the most. And mantra sadhana is definitely going to be great for Pisces. So, a few additional notes we have from one of the classical texts on astrology called Paladipika. Because Venus is exalted in Pisces, the Pisces individual can gain money or wealth through anything that is produced from the ocean. And so what the classical text mentions is like pearls, or like things that come out of the ocean literally.
Maybe a fisherman?
Or a fisherman, sailor, someone that makes their living through the sea in some way. What that can also represent is foreign lands, which are on the other side of the ocean. So money can
cross an ocean.
Yeah. Money can be gained through things that have to do also with foreign lands. And one final point is that all the classical texts state that, and this may be a little unfair, so hopefully no Libras are watching, that Pisces individuals can be overall extremely fortunate. You have the blessings of Jupiter, the positivity of Jupiter, the optimism of Jupiter, and that maturity, that spiritual maturity of being the last sign of the zodiac. So.
And incredibly selfless qualities that, just make you, that can make you a really, really phenomenal person. So we appreciate you taking the time to watch. We hope it was helpful for you. Please go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Don't forget to like our video and comment. We would love to know your thoughts.
Let us know if you're a Pisces and you found any of this information useful, or if you know any Pisces individuals and you have observations about them, let us know in the comments below. Let us know if you liked anything we said, or if you didn't like anything we said.
Don't tell us. I'm just kidding.